Hi, I'm Jacob Heilbrunn, the editor of The National Interest, and my guest today is General Glen VanHerck. And we're going to talk about an important subject, nuclear weapons, and our conversation is sparked by the new movie, A House of Dynamite. And General, I wanted to ask you first, how accurate do you think the movie is in its depiction of the likelihood of such a scenario that a missile that we can't identify is streaking towards the United States and the president has about 20 minutes to make a decision whether to respond or not?
Well, I think the movie itself provides a fairly accurate depiction of the stress, the weight of the decisions, the magnitude of the decisions that would have to be made, and the challenges and weight on the shoulders of those decision makers. Certainly, there's hyperbole added for the purposes of the movie, and I don't think you're gonna have 20 minutes. I think you'll have, more time than that to figure out, but it does a good job of articulating, the magnitude of the situation.
What about the issue of identifying the provenance of the missile? Is that realistic?
The situation we're in today, in the movie itself, with an unknown deployed North Korean submarine, I think is very unlikely. Attribution is always a major concern for missiles, anything, cyber attack. But in this case today, what I would say is we're most likely going to have attribution of whatever missile is launched, wherever it's launched from, in a fairly timely manner.
Did you feel that the depiction of Fort Greely, Alaska was realistic?
Some pieces of it were realistic. Some of it had plenty of hyperbole to exaggerate the scenario that we were in. So, for example, they're not going to know whether they were effective or not. That's not part of today's system and the ability to detect. So, you wouldn't have had those types of emotions being real time at Fort Greely. Certainly, they wouldn't have likely had people out in the missile field so close to the missiles unless they were doing maintenance. And so there were some things that were added for the movie itself. But in general, what I would say is the movie articulated the basics of the mission.
Is the depiction of the president realistic? That he's given the binder and he doesn't really have a full grasp of what's in it until he has to actually make the decision?
I think that depends on individual presidents, likely over history. What I can tell you, the depiction of having a military aid immediately available, having a national security staff and advisor in most cases available is absolutely correct. I would struggle to think you would find the president and just a military advisor on Marine One, but that's not unprecedented where you might solely have just the mill aid with the president for a short duration. Most likely, they're gonna have the military aid and advisor along with the national security staff in close proximity and available to the president.
Let me ask you a broader question about nuclear weapons. Fears about them have ebbed and flowed since the nuclear age began. And Hollywood issued the science fiction film Panic in the Year Zero in 1962, which featured a family going on a road trip into the Sierra Nevada mountains and then watching as a mushroom cloud erupts over Los Angeles. 2 years later, there were three other films, Dr. Strangelove, there was Failsafe, and then there was 7 Days in May, a thriller about a military coup to topple an American president. And then during the Reagan era, you also had another film about nuclear weapons, The Day After, which tried to depict what the damage would look like. When you look back at the Cold War, do you think that the chances of a nuclear war were actually greater than we've assumed, that an accident could have occurred? or do you think that it was a relatively stable situation?
I think there were periods of instability generated by events that happened around the globe, the geopolitical environment. But for the most part, history has shown that nuclear weapons create stability between great powers, and that's been proven since the end of World War II, as great powers have not fought directly in conflict. As far as greater back then or now, what I would say is during the Cold War, the instability at times probably exceeded where we are today. But today, I have articulated and continue to believe that deterrence is eroding and the risk of strategic deterrence failure is growing for multiple reasons, primarily because our homeland has threats against it today across multiple domains that we're challenged to defeat. And I think instability continues to grow.
If I remember correctly, President Obama signed a sweeping revision to our nuclear forces to rebuild them essentially, or to ensure that they remained efficacious. And what is your take on that? Are you saying that we have not done enough to maintain the American nuclear force, at least on the ground or air, sea? What are you driving at?
No, I'm not saying that we haven't done enough. The nuclear triad today is safe, secure, effective, very reliable. It is aging and has to be recapitalized, and that's what's ongoing right now. Our industrial base, quite frankly, is not at the capacity to deliver the capabilities we need fast enough on the timeline that we need. Our threats, especially peer nations, have created capabilities to hold us at risk globally, but especially here in our homeland. That creates instability. Threats that can attack our homeland, such as hypersonic missiles today, which are fielded today, that you can't know exactly where they're going to land, create challenges to continuity of government, to challenges for safe nuclear force protection and projection, nuclear command and control. Cyber capabilities today challenge our ability to maintain command and control and maintain senior leader communications. All of those things are disruptive to strategic stability.
Now, the Chinese apparently are embarking upon an expansion of their nuclear force. How is that going to affect the United States in the future?
Yes, that's a great point. They are moving out quickly to more than double, likely triple or quadruple the size of their nuclear force. So the question becomes one of does the United States have enough nuclear capacity to deter two peer competitors plus potentially opportunistic actors around the globe? And those are policy decisions. They're not military decisions. The military will execute whatever policy we come up with. In the end, what we have to have is a safe, secure, reliable, effective nuclear deterrent with an assured second strike so that nobody can take advantage of us and coerce us in a time of crisis. And I believe that today's weapons, we can do that. We need to evaluate in the future. The environment for nuclear nonproliferation in treaties has rapidly changed as well. The ability to come to an agreement like the New START treaty with a single nation such as Russia is over when you have another peer now. And so we need to think about all future treaties and negotiations with China and Russia, along with our allies and partners. This can't be just unilateral discussions.
So essentially, we are moving into a new nuclear age.
Well, I think we're moving into a new environment where you have to factor multiple countries into your deterrence equation and how you're going to best utilize nuclear weapons. And when I say utilize nuclear weapons, we utilize nuclear weapons every second of every day. World War II wasn't the last time we utilized them. Today, they are utilized for deterrence purposes, and we have to think about that.
Do you think that the likelihood of nuclear war has actually gone up? That's what some people are concerned about, particularly as Russian President Vladimir Putin engages in saber rattling with nuclear weapons over Ukraine.
gone up from what point in time? I don't think that the use of nuclear weapons is imminent. The use of nuclear weapons, I any time, right away, is on the horizon, to be honest with you. I think it was higher during periods of the Cold War, but certainly strategic stability is eroding for multiple factors I previously described, and we just need to be aware of that.
Right. I guess what I'm discussing, which may be a false apprehension, but I was talking with Rick Burt, who helped negotiate the INF Treaty, and he and others think that the memories of the dangers of nuclear war are starting to fade, and that's partly, as you noted, that we have fewer arms control treaties today. And it's much more difficult to conclude them that maybe some other countries think, with Russia engaging in saber rattling, that the barrier to the use of nuclear weapons is somewhat lower than it was in the past. That the fears that surrounded nuclear weapons, the taboo about using them, has eroded.
I wouldn't push back on that statement, to be candid with you. I think peer nations who have been responsible with the design, development, deployment of nuclear weapons still understand the magnitude. I think what has changed is the potential for proxy actors, terrorist groups now to get their hands on radiological devices, not necessarily a nuclear weapon in itself, and potentially utilize those. I do agree that the general public, as those who were around and really understand what transpired with nuclear weapons in World War II, have really lost the full understanding and grasp of the magnitude of destruction and impact that nuclear weapons can have. And therefore, it's good that we talk about nuclear weapons, that we talk about strategic stability and deterrence, and hopefully never have to employ a nuclear weapon, but rather we utilize them for stability and deterrence.
That is the ultimate paradox, isn't it? It's a weapon meant never to be used.
Well, it's used every day. It's not meant to be deployed, but if you must deploy it because of an existential threat, then you must be prepared to do that. And that's candidly why strategic stability has eroded somewhat, is we've given a perception at times of our weakness or desire not to employ weapons. We should be proud of the fact that we have nuclear weapons and they create stability. We don't want to employ them, and we should never give the perception that we wouldn't employ them since we do have them.
Let me ask you, just as a final, to revert back to you mentioned the hypersonic weapons. So you regard those as a significant new threat.
Absolutely, they're a significant new threat. I think the most strategic mission that I did as the commander of NORAD NORTHCOM was threat warning and attack assessment in my NORAD hat. Threat warning and attack assessment is crucial for continuity of government, our ability to maintain our deterrence. It's crucial for the survival of our nuclear forces and much more. Hypersonics are challenging our ability to do those things. That creates instability and erodes strategic stability.
Well, General, thank you for sharing your insights.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Jacob.